All right, we're here at the PRWeek Sports Conference, our first full year conference around sports. What is the importance of being here in this room with so many communicators who are focused on sports in the athletic world today? What is it like to be here for you guys?
I think for me, first of all, I love being in New York City. I don't get out here often, and so this is the sports capital of the world, and it's important for us in the Bay. We get kind of siled on the West Coast a little bit to come into it and just feel the energy in a room like this. And then, we got to talk about Super Bowl 60, which was such a tremendous success for us in the Bay Area, and we had a lot of learnings in comms and media and PR, and to be able to share that out with this group, I think was a lot of fun for us with the group around the panel. So it was great.
As somebody who came up in sports communications and marketing, I worked for an athletic department. I worked for an NBA team. I worked in-house at Jordan Brand. It's just there's so much camaraderie amongst the sports communications and marketing cohort, and there's so many old friends that you see from different places, and we're all going through very similar things right now. I mean, I think sports is on the biggest stage it's ever been on, which means it's also as complex as it's ever been. And I think as communicators, for those of us that are trying to really use communications to drive business for all of the different brands and entities that we work with, it's awesome just to be able to share ideas and experiences and learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. You guys just came off stage talking about, obviously, the Super Bowl, like you just mentioned this year. The biggest production, as Katie Hill said, this is the Super Bowl of Super Bowls for us. What's something that you maybe didn't share on stage that people don't realize about what goes on behind the scenes? Obviously, this is very much a partnership effort, and the way that the four entities that were on stage work together to make that happen. What's something that people maybe don't realize that's going on in the back end that they could be aware of?
I referenced this a little bit when I was up there, but I don't know if I understood going in how much we would need to talk to each other on a daily basis. I think we did so much planning beforehand that I innocently or naively felt like we had kind of done the proactive issues management and had the game plan. And my learning was that you actually never know what's going to happen on a daily basis. There is some reactive comms and strategy that you have to think through, and it's happening almost every minute of every day within the week of Super Bowl. And so that was a learning for me. While there was process, and Katie talked about process, and our process was really good, there was also a little bit of chaos in that process, which was actually good. It allowed for a lot of creativity. It allowed for a lot of people to be in the room thinking about things a little bit differently. But that reactive messaging and being okay with the reactivity of it, I think was a really big learning for me.
We touched on stage a little bit, but I think the thing for me that was the biggest learning was the role of government. And there is a massive public affairs component to pulling off the Super Bowl. And so it's local government, it's state government, it's federal government. And there's so many entities involved, from transportation to Homeland Security to local electeds that work with permitting on events. That was a really big thing that people maybe didn't see that was more behind the scenes, was just all the work with electeds and government affairs to make sure that we had really freedom to operate and pull off the event that we knew we had to be successful.
Mm-hmm. You touched on it in the session, the scope of this particular Super Bowl. Obviously, there's been many host cities in the past, but the Bay Area was kind of a different animal in its own sense. The activations were happening in San Francisco, but the Super Bowl itself was happening just outside of that. What complications and benefits was it to have that larger area and that larger scope for the Super Bowl?
I mean, we saw this as a benefit. It was actually done very deliberately to put the widest geographical footprint on the Super Bowl as we possibly could, of course, with the NFL, aligned as well. And so you had opening night out in San Jose. We actually started before then in Oakland with our supplier diversity programming. We were in the Peninsula in Redwood City for a media party. We went into the city of San Francisco for all of the Super Bowl experience and Pro Bowl, and then came back out to the South Bay for the game. And again, that was a learning from Super Bowl 50, which is, a lot of the region felt like this event wasn't for them because it was a San Francisco event. Even Santa Clara, where the game was hosted, felt like it was a San Francisco event. And so our job was to make sure that, residents of the Bay, no matter where they lived, felt like this was an event for them, even if they weren't going to the game. And so, some of it was just making sure the execution was done, but a lot of it was just messaging around that, right? Making sure that people actually knew that we did it deliberately and that we were listening and therefore executing based on what they were saying to us. And that's where the comms plan became so important. In that is, you can do it and no one will know, and then they'll go back to their same thought because it's just bred into people in the Bay. You have to tell people that you've done things on purpose, and so that at some point they believe you, and then they turn out and do they have the narrative themselves. So done very purposefully, actually.
Yeah, and from a communication standpoint, as Z said, we really learned a lot from Super Bowl 50, and we knew that we had an opportunity to craft a narrative that was very intentionally around how we were bringing the Super Bowl to the entire Bay Area and not just one part of it. And so she talked about it on stage, but having a narrative that was uniting the Bay Area through sport was very intentional. The way we talked about the Bay Area versus any one city in all of our communications was intentional. If we brought one elected official to an event, we brought them all to an event. So all the micro details you would think about the communications plan, when you spread that across 9 counties, 4 cities, it really became central to our communications plan. And that's what drove our whole narrative. And it really did. It was validating when we did see people playing it back to us.
There was a point in time, right, Mitch, during the week where I think there was, I can't remember the outlet, but we did get a little bit of flack from somebody in the media saying, oh my God, things are so far away. And our response when they asked us for comment was like, yes, we've done that on purpose. And then all of a sudden their response in the next article they sent out was like, oh, this was done on purpose. Okay, right. And so we knew that getting people to go, maybe a bit of a further distance initially, at least for media, would be something that we'd have to really be okay with. And I think at some point they just got it and said, hey, the importance and the significance to the region in doing this is vast. And so we saw the resulting media actually be okay following that point.
Yeah, you spoke about all of the different stakeholders that you were constantly engaged with. I mean, you said you were doing like PR and comms focus meetings every single day, which obviously the people in this room appreciate. To your point, is validating in terms of the role of comms in these kinds of events. How important were other stakeholders in terms of like media, but also non-traditional media, like creators and brands and sponsors and all those other people that are attending throughout that week, all the activations that happen, not even during the Super Bowl, but before them as well?
There is so much coordination from a comms perspective.
Can only imagine the spreadsheet.
Yeah. And because like to your point about brands, if we were going to sign a partner like Dolby or EA Sports or Genentech or PG&E, they have their own communications plan and they have their own communications objectives. And so now every time we would sign a new partner, that's almost like a new client for me as the head of comms for the host committee to make sure that I'm coordinating with them on what their plan is and making sure that they're able to reach their objectives through us as the vehicle to do that. And that's just on the brand side. Then you think about the electeds. They each have their own comms leads. They each have messaging that their leaders are trying to, amplify in the market. And so if you just take all of that universe of stakeholders that we talked about in that room and think about all of them having a comms plan and their own objectives, and we were the ones at the center of the whole thing, really in service of them to try to make sure that they could all reach their objectives through us as the vehicle, it made for like the most energizing, time probably I've been in communications.
Yeah, I think the fascinating part for me, Mitch, was just every time we did an event, either leading up to the week of Super Bowl or during Super Bowl, the number of media or creators, anybody who wanted to tell a story that would email you or Fleischman of like, I want to go to that thing. And it always was more than we thought was actually possible. Oh, we'll get 20 people out here. And there's 70 cameras. And so, some of that is just the world we live in today. Some of it was because we were doing things that were really new and people wanted to see, hey, how is this going to play out? But I think also there was so much that we were putting out into the market from a narrative perspective. I think people wanted to hear and listen to what it was. We did the opening presser with, the commissioner did an opening press conference, and he referenced the host committee in his opening presser. They did it during the game on broadcast. That's not common. That doesn't happen all of the time. And I think we got a lot of equity in terms of what we were doing from a lot of different people, such that, you had 200% of what our original estimate was for media and creators coming to events that we initially anticipated.
One of my enduring memories is that on the same day, we had a call with the NFL, government affairs, legal, the 49ers, and we were having a very serious discussion about scenario planning for a variety of issues. An hour later, she had Too Short and E40 on stage at the opening press conference, playing the Bay Area's legendary hits in front of an audience of people that were going wild. And just to have the juxtaposition of those two things represents what the broad spectrum of things you work on if you work on a Super Bowl.
It's a big year for sports. You're getting part of the FIFA World Cup is coming your way soon. I know you said you're not fully mentally or physically prepared for that just yet. What do you think? I mean, obviously there's a lot of planning that's been ongoing for years for the World Cup, but other big sporting events that we're going to see the LA Olympics on the West Coast again in 2028. What can they learn from your experience this year?
I think, obviously, the main point of what I wanted to talk about today was just how important comms is as part of your strategy, and sometimes, overlooked, especially when within a sports commission environment. You have so many things to do. You're responsible for operating this mega event that can get lost. And so to make sure that you understand the importance and the value it can bring to you, I think that's an important learning. And then for me, it's been, don't be afraid to try new things. Like, you don't know what's going to stick. People have asked me, like, what has been the biggest challenge in my position? And really the biggest challenge has been, I approach any sort of event or problem with, like, what do I think can stick? And I throw a bunch of things on the wall. And my challenge is actually, like, prioritizing and really getting to a narrower scope so I can focus. But you could see it in the Super Bowl this year. We did a lot of things that were different. And sometimes people assume that the NFL is going to say no, or someone's going to say no, and you're just not going to get permission. There was a lot of yeses. And I encourage events like the Olympic Games, things that are even more traditional and you don't think you can do something new, to continuously evolve, because that's how we get better doing that.
All right, Z, Mitch, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.